The bill be now read a second time, and I call the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate the member for Durack on that excellent speech and the way you've explained how the changes are going to make such a difference. And I'd like to build on your comments to do three things. I want to acknowledge and say, well done, government. You've done a really good job on this one. Thank you. I now want to say, let's get serious. If we can do this bit well, let's tackle the really big issue, which is picking up on what the member of Durack has said. Let's have a policy that actually addresses education and higher education in rural and regional Australia. Let's all of us put our shoulders to the wheel. Let's really deliver on this, because it's too important not to. And third, I would actually like to talk about what that the ingredients of a policy would be. So three things to say today. I want to acknowledge and talk about the good work that's been done. I want to talk about the research that's been undertaken on the issues and what a policy would look like, and finish off on a call to action to my colleagues opposite to say, show us seriously, and particularly to the National Party, let's go to the next election with a higher education policy and an architecture that actually addresses the issues that my colleagues have been talking about today. So let's get underway. Why is this so important? This bit of legislation is so important because the process has been good, because the senator, the committee, the work's been done. We've had a need, we've listened to our community, we've consulted, we've gone out to community groups, we've set up an interdepartmental committee on access to higher education for rural and regional students. We've had hearings all around the country, in my community of Wangaratta, and this legislation is a direct result of that. So well done, government. You can do things when you apply your mind to it. You can do good work. I just want to see more of it in this place. And I particularly want to see more of it in this topic of higher education. But why is it I'm so passionate about this? Because I know that already in rural and regional Australia we don't have a comprehensive policy to address the issue. We have significant underrepresentation of regional students in higher education. We have lower levels of higher education attainment in our regions, and we have this enormous unfulfilled potential for developing regional Australia if we could get the education, if we could get the skills, if we could get it working properly. And I'm particularly concerned because in my electorate of Indi, only 57% of the 20 to 24-year-olds finish Year 12. Only 20 to 24% finish Year 12, compared with 78% in Melbourne. And only 19% of those between 20 and 39 age hold a bachelor degree or higher, compared to 31% across Australia. 63% of people in Indi are in the bottom half of the index of relative social economic disadvantage. And many, many young people in my community move away from home and study. And in my home shire of Indigo Shire, there are 420 people aged between 17 and 18, but just 200 aged between 21 and 22. The young people go, and it's the saddest thing that I can see is our biggest export from rural and regional Australia being our young people. And the major way I can see us getting them back and holding them is in having quality education and addressing the many barriers that we know to that. So I would like to just introduce to the House three reports that have recently been done covering up on this topic. The first report I'd like to talk about is a study of 4 towns undertaken by Ballarat University, commissioned by the Hume RDA, Regional Development Australia, supported by Regional Development Victoria and the Victorian Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. So this report tells us of 4 towns in my electorate, towns of Wangaratta, Mansfield, Myrtleford and Benalla. And under the Australian Standard Geographical Classification System, they're all rated RA4, Remote Australia. And the Hume region consistently has lower retention rates for Year 7 to 12 than non-metropolitan areas, with, as I said, 22% of young people leaving school through Years 10 to 12, and compared with 15% for metropolitan Melbourne. And compared with statewide average of 30.4%, the percentage of Hume population aged 24 to 34 with a bachelor degree or higher was recorded as substantially lower, at 17.35%. So my own electorate is particularly disadvantaged, and we absolutely need to take some action on this. So the research shows the major barriers: economic barriers, geographical barriers, information barriers, and what the researchers call class barriers. We know what the issues are, and it's really clear we know what to do. So recommendations, and I won't bore the House with going through all of them, just say they're here and in the report. We need to have better information. We need to have more flexible delivery. We absolutely need to work with local government, state government and federal government to develop economics and have the jobs there. And we absolutely need to lobby government to have a holistic approach to solving this issue. So the recommendations are there in great detail and, as I say, to be looked at. The second thing I would really like to make mention to is what my colleague for Durack talks about, is what happens in rural and regional Australia when you don't have enough money, you get into uni and then you defer. Now, this idea of deferring is really important. It's a good thing to do in some levels. But the latest available data for Victoria says that 16.5% of non-metropolitan school completers, 16.5 for non-metro, and 8.1 of metropolitan school leaders defer. So 16% of our kids who finish Year 12 defer, and only 8% in Melbourne. So what's going on? Why would that happen? What does it tell us? Further, we know that 3 years out from school, a little over 2/3 of regional deferrers in the study ended up in university. Now, it's good that 2/3 did, but it means 1/3 never took up the offer or dropped out soon after doing so. And the reasons are related to financial stress, travel-related factors. It seems to be the biggest issue of getting, once you've deferred, actually picking yourself up and getting to Melbourne. It's no easy task, as members of this parliament who live in country areas have done. It's a huge social adjustment, it's an enormous financial cost, and then you've got the need of actually studying on top of everything else you do. So the work has been done, we know what the problems are and we know what the solutions are. And then I particularly want to talk to that bit of work deals with the problems and solutions for young people. The third area I'd like to deal with is the problems of funding our universities. And there's been some excellent work done in this area as well. The Australian Government Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations has done a review of regional loading and presented this very, very, very worthwhile, well-researched report. So what the report tells us is that we know how to solve this problem. We know what the issues are, we know what the policy impediments are, we know what needs to be done. The thing that we're actually lacking is the political will for both sides of parliament to actually come to the party and do what needs to be doing. So I'd just like to pick up on some of these higher education issues that are mentioned in this report from the Department of Education, Employment and Workplace Relations. The current regional loading formula is not appropriate for the needs of regional higher education. The cost of regional higher education provision is greater than the funding provided. Regional higher education faces significant economic disincentives. There's need for much greater cooperation between all the institutions. There's huge economies of scale that we could achieve. There's low participation rate of regional students, as I've talked about, and the deferral rate is a real problem. The report proposes that regional higher education differs from metropolitan areas in the following key ways. Participation rates are lower, completers of Year 12 are less likely to go to university, students face greater disincentives to study, students are more likely to come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, students are more likely to be female, older and care for dependents than for their metropolitan counterparts. Students are more likely to be enrolled in enabling courses and less likely to be enrolled in research or doctorates or master courses. Students are more likely to study part-time and via distance, and graduates, once we get through, graduates in regional areas do tend to stay in regional areas. The report makes a very strong case for why it's important for the nation to invest in a regional higher education infrastructure or architecture. That there's external benefits, we make significant contributions to our community, there's enormous marketing, there's a market failure in rural and regional Australia, and surely it's a matter of equity. Students, wherever you are, deserve access to quality education. The policy objectives outlined in this report I think are really important to bring before the House today. the major contributing outcomes is we need to increase participation rates. We need to address the low SES and Indigenous participation rates. We need to meet regional workforce needs. We need to improve the sustainability and quality of regional higher education, and we need to address regional social and economic development. So there's a clear policy framework that needs to be addressed. There's much more in this report, and I commend the authors of it. You've done a fantastic job. The arguments have been made. But in bringing my talks to a conclusion and, again, acknowledging the work that's already been done, I really call to my colleagues opposite. You know how to do this work. You absolutely know how to work in a collaborative way. We've worked with the budget. We know how to address some of these problems. We've done the baby steps. Now we've actually got to tackle the real problem. The real issue is how do we have a regional higher education policy that actually does the things that we need it to do that have been outlined. So, in bringing my comments to a close, I say to my colleagues opposite, this issue is about infrastructure. This issue is about nation building. This issue is about innovation and creativity. This issue is about equity and about outcomes. And if we truly want Australia to be the great place that our new Prime Minister is telling us to be, if we really truly want to take opportunities of living in the best time in our Australia's history, then we cannot afford to leave the young people of rural and regional Australia behind. We cannot afford to say, oh yeah, we knew the problem, but we didn't have the political will to act. So I call on my colleagues opposite, particularly the National Party, go to your Liberal Party colleagues. I call on the member for Durack. You're a good Liberal woman. Go to your colleagues. Go to the party meetings. I call on the member for Richmond, a really good member of the Labor Party and an excellent member of the opposition. Go to your party rooms. Argue the case for the infrastructure and the architecture, so that when we come back in 5 years' time, we're not having a debate in this House about the disadvantage of rural and regional Australia. Clearly, one size does not fit all. Clearly, we need special consideration for rural and regional young people. To Senator McKenzie, you and your committee have done a great job and you've begun the process. Don't stop there. Really work in a cooperative, bipartisan approach so that all the people across rural and regional Australia get the education they deserve in the way that they deserve, so they too can be part of this great nation and bring their intellectual capacity to bear on the many problems we face. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the chance to support this bill and look forward to the many bills that will follow in consequence.
I thank the member